Meet a Myrtle Beach banking dynamo and community servant coming up next on Carolina People. Good morning. Welcome to Carolina People. This morning we're at the Myrtle Beach Herald at Myrtle Square Mall. We're visiting with Walt Standish, the President and Chief Executive Officer for Beach First National Bank. Good morning, Walt.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for coming in.
This is a pleasure.
It's so exciting to think, of course, and just thinking about you, to think about now almost 3 decades, I hate to say it, in banking, and 25 of those years with a large, almost international bank, and then now the last 3.5 years with almost 4 years now with Beach First.
It's been a long career. Banking's about all I've ever done. I started out with the old Hootie Johnson Bank in Columbia, which was known as Bankers Trust then, and it evolved through various mergers to become Bank of America, and had a great run with them. It was a good career and 25 years working with them, and a great organization that is still doing well, and I moved over to a small bank.
Yeah, now that Hootie Johnson, is that the one with the Augusta, with the
same guy,
with the Masters? Yeah,
and it's really interesting because he's really gotten a bad rap. He did so many things for minorities and women and democratic political causes that for him to be branded the way he is really just a sad thing, because he's a great man.
You grew up where, Walt?
I actually grew up outside of New York City and came to Columbia in 1968. And traveled around South Carolina a little bit with my job with Bank of America, and wanted to get back to the beach, and got back to Myrtle Beach by way of Beach First, which was a great move for me. I'm really happy.
Yes, very definitely. You attended school in Columbia?
I did. Went to USC.
Oh, great.
Graduated in '72 from USC, and in '73 started with Bankers Trust.
That is amazing. So truly 3 decades in banking.
Really has been. I'm not as old as I look, but I've had almost 30 years of banking now.
Kept your youth amazingly, Walt. That's fantastic. Well, let's talk about some of the changes in banking over the last 3 decades. When you think back to when you first started in '73, what would be the, let's say, top 3 biggest changes?
You know, I think the biggest thing would be technology, and that's probably the thing in any industry. The interesting thing to me, though, is how much things have stayed the same. It's still a people business, and I really felt like the larger banks had gotten away from that a little bit, so I wanted to get back to where I could get in a local community and do things in the community like I can do in Myrtle Beach with Beach First. But I think technology would be the biggest change, and everything else is a distant second or third after technology.
And when we think about technology, are we thinking about internet banking, or are we just thinking about the ability to communicate all the offices together? Or
yeah, probably all of that, but also the manpower that's needed to do things now is so different, and it's really mind power more so than manpower. It was such a paper-driven system when I got into it. Now even checks are becoming almost a thing of the past with debit cards and automatic transfers and automatic payroll deposit and all of those things that internet bill paying, all of those things are changing so fast that those changes have been hard to keep up with, but we're happy that technology again allows the small banks to be able to compete. We were afraid, or I was afraid when I came from Bank of America to Beach First, that technology would be something we couldn't afford. As it turns out, we can afford to compete on that level, and then it still is a people business, and that's what we do best.
For a customer who still likes to get their checks in their hand or write them and get them back so they can look at them and know that someone's actually done something with them, or is it still a banking opportunity?
It's fading fast, but it's still there. It's still there. We send what we call images or copies of the checks back to our customers, but they also can go on the internet before we even send them back and say, now I know I wrote check 312 to somebody, who was it? They can go to the internet that day and look at that check if it has in fact cleared the bank, see the front and back of the check, and that's the technology that we can afford to have that we couldn't have a long time ago.
And that's available at Beach First.
It is.
That's powerful.
It really is. It's amazing what we can do. They can do the same thing with their deposits or their checks. A lot of people have either a spouse or a child that might write a check and didn't write it down in the register.
Right.
They go in and look, and they can see where it went.
How about that internet banking? Well, it seems kind of scary to me, going online, and don't crazy things happen on the internet?
I think 30 years ago, I had the same conversation about checks with some people, but when they were used to using cash and we wanted them to use checks, so maybe I have been around too long. But I think it's really a similar thing. Years ago, people used cash and didn't really understand this whole cash thing, this whole check thing. It didn't make sense. Now with the Internet, it's really similar. People are used to using checks, and now we're asking them to do some things on the Internet if they like. If they don't, we'll always have the option to do checks, to write checks. But the Internet, being able to transfer money without having to come to the bank, being able to control where your money's going and also see it and be in control and not have to wait for your bank statement is what people really love about it.
Now, your involvement now, I mean, the position at Beach First is very similar to when you got into banking 30 years ago. I mean, obviously that bank 30 years ago in Columbia is much like a Beach First now. Was it a community bank then?
It really was. They were based in Greenwood, South Carolina, which is a small town in, I guess, what you'd call the western part of the state. And they were based there, but they had started to expand, and we're in the process of moving their headquarters to Columbia when I got there. But there probably wasn't much difference in the size of where Bankers Trust was 30 years ago and where Beach First is now.
Right.
Very similar situation.
You all now have how many branches, Walt?
We have 3 locations here on the Grand Strand and 1 in Hilton Head, actually. So that's been a good move for us, too. A little bit unusual to jump over several communities, but it was a good fit for us. And I know the market from having spent some time in Beaufort, so it was a good fit for us, and it's working out great.
That is. Now, that requires a little more travel time from you, I guess.
I've done a good many of that 4-hour drive between here and Hilton Head. It's become a lot longer drive than it was years ago because everything's built up between here and there. But it's been fun. I enjoy going down there. We've got a great group of people down there, put together a local board down there, and have tried to keep the local touch down there, and it's working really well.
Let's talk about that local touch. What's the significance of when we think about community banks juxtaposed against the size of a Bank of America, which you had ended your career or ended that extension through large banks? What's the difference between Bank of America and Beach First?
There's a lot of differences, but I think mainly it gets to where the local decisions are made. And at Beach First, we make the decisions as locally as we can, and we try to push the decisions down even to the branch level, whether it's North Myrtle Beach or whether it's Surfside or at our main office. And then in Hilton Head, we try to push the decision-making down there. A larger bank, almost by definition, has to try to centralize their decision-making, whether it be in Charlotte, Atlanta, Winston-Salem, whatever. But they don't leave as much local decision-making. And that works for some people. For the large corporations or the people that want to have an office in San Francisco or New York, then maybe they need a large bank. But if you're a local contractor or somebody like that only is going to do business in Myrtle Beach and only needs a bank in Myrtle Beach, then the smaller banks really work better for those folks.
About a month ago, we were at the Radisson Plaza Hotel, Myrtle Beach Convention Center, up on the top floor, and we're visiting with a guy named Nick Sherfacy, who's the community banker now with Wachovia.
That's right.
Or one of the community bankers. It was exciting hearing him talk about some of the transitions that First Union / or now Wachovia have made into trying to have that local impact, I guess because of the strength of some strong community banks that have been coming on into communities that Wachovia have been dominant. What is that like now, recognizing the larger folks trying to make a commitment to be like a community bank?
It's a real challenge because in a lot of ways we're trying to be like them, in a lot of ways they're trying to be like us, and everybody's trying to sort of find the middle. They need to be big enough to get the economies that you can get by being big, and we need to be big enough to be able to compete with the bigger banks, and so we're all fighting to get kind of to the middle. But at the end of the day, I think one of the things that happens with the big banks that really happened in my career with 4 or 5 different moves is as people get ahead in their profession, the tendency in the big banks is to move them to another market. And the small banks don't have that tendency, and that's where the advantage of the people business. So it might help Bank of America to move the next person to a larger market and a larger city. It probably helps the bank. It might hurt the city that they left.
Right.
And that's what we're trying not to do. When we went to North Myrtle Beach and to Hilton Head, we hired managers there and told them, we want you to be in this market and we want to pay you enough to stay in this market for your whole career so that people will look at you as the banker in this market.
That's a great point.
And not try to climb a corporate ladder to another larger market.
And obviously through acquisitions, when you're on an acquisitive mode with a large bank, it makes it very difficult oftentimes, I'm sure, for the bankers in the community. I remember one of the folks who'd been at Wachovia when First Union was buying Wachovia, talking about he was at a point where a long-standing, very large client he couldn't make a relatively small loan to because he was had to go through either too much paperwork or they just wouldn't allow him to do anything. That must be traumatic.
It really is tough. They get into what's known in banking as line of business banking, and this person only lends to this type of business, and this person lends to this type of business or this size business. And again, it works at a large scale, but whether it works in a community like Myrtle Beach is where we don't think that works that well. We think that if you're going to be a business lender in Myrtle Beach, you do every business you can deal with, and that's what we try to do. It's a little bit different take, but it works well for us.
Could you share with the viewers kind of what a lending limit would be for a bank that has 4 branches now, I guess continues to expand?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because legally we have a limit of something close to $2 million, but we're in the middle now of about a $12 million loan that we are doing. What happens is there are a network of other banks that will what we call buy a portion of that loan. So we have the $12 million loan. We're what's known as the lead bank, and we have 6 or 8 other banks that take $1 million or $2 million each. So we can do a $12 million. We can do any size loan as long as we can find the people sort of below the surface that do that. And that may be, typically it's community banks in South Carolina, but sometimes there's internet banks out there. There's other banks out there that need loans, and so we quote sell those loans to them.
So those other folks really have to trust y'all's research capacity, or does everyone get involved in the due diligence there?
They do their own due diligence, different levels at different banks, and depending on their experience with us, we have one particular bank that we do most of it with, and they buy most of our loans. Most of what we look at is less than $5 million. So if we take $1 million and they do $4 million, then that's pretty much, we only need that one bank. When we get up to the $12 million development type loans, then we might use 6 or 8 banks, or we might sell it all to one bank and they might find 6 or 8 banks. It's sort of a trickle down process. So we can really do about any size loan. Most of our loans are in the $500,000 range, though. I mean, we don't do a lot of $3 and $4 and $5 million loans. It's between probably $200,000 and $500,000 or $600,000 of our larger loans are typically that size.
And that would be indicative of most community banks, Walt?
I think you would find that.
Okay.
I think that's probably true.
When someone hears those two words next to each other, community bank, obviously you talked about the local decision-making, the local boards. Is there more to it than that?
It's really more of a way of doing business, I think, is how people think about it. When somebody pictures themselves as a community bank, it's really more about we're going to be focused on this community and doing business in this community more so than trying to go and conquer New York City or San Francisco or somewhere like that. And that's really what I think what people think of. But generally a community bank is, any smaller bank is thought of as a community bank.
Okay.
Is really where I think it ends up being the semantics of the community bank phrase.
We talk about conquering large cities. You think about the expansion from Charlotte into Texas and later into I guess San Francisco.
Right.
With and oftentimes you think of one person, Hugh McCall, for instance, more or less at the helm, pushing through those, or an Ed Crutchfield doing things. What's that like? Is it that person, or is it someone's vision like that in a large bank when you see that kind of progression across the country? What's that like for someone who's been within essentially that same institution for 15 or 20 or 25 years to see y'all's progression when you were with Bank of America?
It was interesting. Hugh McCall was obviously the leader of all of that. I mean, he kept us on track to become a larger and larger bank, and we really all bought into that philosophy, and it works and continues to work to this day. It's been a great run for that company, and Hugh McCall was the one to build it up. The gentleman in there now, Ken Lewis, what a lot of my friends at Bank of America tell me today is Hugh McCall was the one to really build the bank, and now Ken Lewis is better at running the bank. And that may be true. Mr. McCall was a great leader, a great motivator, and really was interested in building the bank. And now Mr. Lewis is in there really running the bank. So it was a fun ride. It really was. I enjoyed all of my time with Bank of America. I had a great career. They were good to me, and don't have anything bad to say about them. It was a good run. But this at Beach First is a much better fit for me. And I hope I have another 30 years to do it.
Yeah.
I don't know that the board wants me around quite that long, but I would love to be doing it for the next 15 or more years.
The board, for the most part, is right here in Horry or Georgetown County.
They are mostly local business people that are owners of some sort of business or another, but it is a great board. It's really the reason I came back. When I came back I was in Charlotte for a while. When I came back, it was really because I knew the folks on this board and was really impressed and knew that they would do the right thing by anybody, and they've been great to me.
What prompted those men and women, or the folks on the board, to get together to set up a community bank?
I think there was two things. One was the investment potential, and it has great potential, but it's been a long run for them. They've been in it for 7 years now. And one of the interesting things about our board is they have taken nothing out of the company in terms of board fees or anything like that. We've just now put something in effect for them when they turn 65. But up until today, for the first 7 years, they just worked for the shareholders for no pay and a lot of hours, I can tell you. They put in a lot of work. So they were really dedicated. But so they did it for the investment potential, and I think the investment is finally paying off for them and our shareholders, but also to have a local bank. I think there was a lot of that idea that we saw how a lot of the local banks had grown and become big banks, and we wanted to have something local that they could be involved with. So that was the main impetus for it.
Is there enough room here in town for any more community banks? We've seen, since Beach first came on the scene, I guess Crescent Banks come on board, and Sun Bank. Obviously, next week we'll be visiting with David Morrow and Tommy Bouchette. Well, what about the addition of any more community banks, Walt?
Yeah, I don't know where the number is that we reached the breaking point. I think, if I'm right, I think there's 18 different bank names here in the county and maybe 100 branches just in Horry County before you even get to Georgetown County. That is, by a lot of definitions, the most overbanked county in the state if you look at the various things. So I don't know that we all seem to be doing fairly well. And as some of the other mergers come about, I think some things will change and there'll be fewer. I don't know that you'll see many more banks coming in, but the water's warm, come on in, I guess is sort of the way it is.
Conway National Bank celebrating 100 years here in Horry County. Coastal Federal Bank next year celebrating 5 decades here. Obviously, community banks can make an incredible impact in a community for many, many, many years.
Those are two fine institutions. I mean, we kind of envy what they've been able to do in this market and really try to duplicate it in a lot of ways, but they are great institutions that really show what kind of business you can do and hopefully still be a good corporate citizen, and they've both done a great job of that.
And that name Beach First enables you to keep your focus on the beach, on the coast. Of course, you know the bulk of our viewers are in the PD and in southeastern North Carolina, less than a third here in Horry County. And so that aspect of Beach First, you were going to be up and down the coastline. It assumably, would it be difficult ever to expand inward?
Yeah, we have talked about the possibility of doing things inward, and it might make sense at some point. When we went to Hilton Head, we talked about the name, and we talked to a lot of people in Hilton Head, and what we found was that they loved the name. We thought they might think of it as being Myrtle Beach, but what they thought, it was just a great sounding name. So we didn't change the name, but it was something that the name travels much better than we thought it would. But we would consider going inland if the opportunity was right. There's some great markets inland, as you know.
Oh, yeah, very definitely. We've got about 7 minutes, Walt, and there's two big things I want to focus on. Your involvement with the Chamber of Commerce, but also I think recently you've taken on the position as chairman of the Convention Center Hotel Board. Share with the viewers a little bit about, we can talk about the Chamber in a minute, but the Convention Center Hotel Board, when was that set up and what's the significance of that? And we're talking about the Myrtle Beach Convention Center.
Right, the Myrtle Beach Convention Center Hotel Corp., which really in effect owns what is known as the Radisson, was formed by City Council about 3 years ago. And we started meeting, I guess, almost 3 years ago now, trying to get everything put together after the city had put together the financing package. And that board is made up of 7 individuals appointed by City Council. And we have been charged essentially with running the hotel, but not operating it. It's operated by a Radisson Carlson corporate under a management agreement between the Hotel Corp and Radisson. And that part is a good setup. That works very well. At this point, as most people know, the Radisson is not meeting their projections, but there are a lot better things to come. We have some challenging times in terms of some bond restructuring and refinancing that we're going through now. But after we get through that, I think people are going to be proud of that facility. If you or your viewers have not visited that property, I invite you to at least go walk through it, even if you can't go and spend the night there, or hopefully send your convention group, whatever professional associations you're involved in. It is a showpiece. It is just, I tell a lot of people, I've been around the state, and it's by far, to me, it is now the prettiest hotel, the nicest hotel in South Carolina. I've been to just about all of them, what was the Omni in Charleston, and the Westin in Hilton Head, and I guess was it the Hyatt maybe in downtown Greenville. This is a much nicer property, and I don't think we take a back seat to anybody in the state. It's the nicest property, and it is just unbelievable how well it is done. The rooms are just quality, the service is quality, the lobby, the M-Bar, Vidalia's restaurant is a wonderful restaurant. So it's going to work. It's just we've got some trying times right now.
Well, why explain real quick, we got about 5 minutes. Let's talk about why a city, is it common that a city will finance a hotel, and how do they go through that process? And of course, you know, one of the great things, we were at the Radisson almost a year ago, right before the opening, and visited with Tom Leith and visited with Michael Pointer and the whole crew there. And Tom made a very strong point in that you have a convention center hotel not for the convention goers, but for the meeting planners oftentimes, so they can go up and down and be there. You want to use all the adjacent hotels, and that's one of the great things. There's so many large hotels close to the convention center hotel. That's where the convention goers are more than likely going to be staying. But with only 404 rooms there, the real focus is on making sure the meeting planners can get back and forth.
Right. The meeting planners want it, and then if you want to increase the level of expenditure of your conventioneers, they are looking for higher class hotels, and they want them on site. And that happens a lot. We have some wonderful properties up and down the oceanfront, but they're not attached to the convention center, and that's a different market that we go after. So I think what you'll find is the meeting planners want a property on site, and they will recommend to their convention that they bring it there. And that's really what's been happening. The sales effort has really started to kick in. It didn't take off near as fast as we like for it to, but it is now in full swing, and we think there's great things ahead.
Craig Smith was with us at the Fox studio maybe 3 months ago, and of course we've been with Michael Pointer, who's now actually has announced, I guess he's leaving town, and have been with Rita Gray, I mean Joe Durham, the whole crew over there, an amazing crew that have been put together, and of course a lot of transition period. I'm sure that's been difficult for you, Walt, and the whole hotel board to see the Carlson group, the Radisson, go through some shuffles there. It's been difficult for everyone, but very exciting to know there is a great future ahead.
There really is. There's been a lot of changes and a lot of personnel changes, a lot of changes in the way we do business, but at the end of the day, it's a great facility, and Radisson has brought in a great staff that we're really proud of. And I think as we go through the next few years, you'll see how successful that hotel can be. The city did it a little bit different. When Charlotte and Raleigh did their convention center, their new convention center hotels, they just put in, say, $20 million. I think it was actually more than that, but let's say $20 million. When the city of Myrtle Beach put this deal together, they said, let's see if we can do it with just the city guaranteeing about $20 million, but not putting it in unless we absolutely have to. And that's kind of the way we approached it. And we're still trying to stay at that point where the city doesn't have to fund the issue like they did in Charlotte and Raleigh, and probably most cities. When they do a convention center hotel, the city puts in a substantial amount of money. Similar to arenas you hear about, football stadiums, those kinds of things. A convention center is a very similar thing in a smaller town that we work with.
Let's segue real quick. We got about 3 minutes. Well, Brad Dean was with us last Wednesday, and Dennis Wade with us last Tuesday, and obviously the Chamber of Commerce is a very important component in your life. I think I saw you're the membership division chair next year.
I am.
Or for the 03-04 year. What's the significance of a Chamber of Commerce here in Myrtle Beach, and why should a business owner decide they want to be involved in the chamber?
This chamber is a little bit different because it doesn't get nearly as involved in economic development as other chambers. So a lot of people that come here that have businesses from other parts of town expect the chamber to be involved more in economic development, or in recruiting businesses, better said. What this chamber does more of is support tourism, and that's really what this chamber is about. Any of the businesses out there that want to help promote tourism and think it helps their business, they should be a member of the chamber. And I don't know that there's any out there that can say they don't they don't benefit from tourism. So this Chamber of Commerce does a lot of different things, but what we do best is support and promote tourism and bring visitors here and help visitors who are already here. The Chamber just does so many different things, and now with Brad as our new leader, it's going to be a great future for the Chamber as well.
Well, what would be some of the, whether it's empirical or not, that you make that point, it's a very important point, that you can't imagine a business not being positively impacted by tourism. What are you thinking when you say that?
Well, we do a lot of business with construction trade, for instance, and a lot of what they do might be supporting or fixing up something at a hotel, or doing something at a restaurant, or doing something at one of the amusement parks or one of the theaters. All of them are tourism, and that subcontractor, for instance, might have 20 employees. If we didn't have tourism here, they might have 3 or 4 employees. So their business is better because of tourism, and we all thrive because all of those people. I remember when I worked in Charlotte, we used to have to load up the banks with money on Friday afternoon, and then when I worked in Myrtle Beach, we had to unload all the money Monday morning and Tuesday morning. And frankly, what we did is we sent it back to Charlotte, and the cycle started over again. Wow. The cash itself. But those people were coming from North Carolina to spend money at Myrtle Beach, and that drives so much here. Oh, yeah. And the more of them we can get here, the better it's going to be for all the businesses here. And that's what the Chamber does.
If Walt Standish wasn't the president and chief executive officer of Beach First National Bank, what do you think you'd be doing?
Oh, I don't know that anybody else would have me. I don't know. I might be unemployed. I don't know. I always tell people that my dream job was to be the general manager of the New York Yankees. But other than that, once I realized I couldn't play center field for them, but I don't know what I'd be doing. I enjoy Myrtle Beach. I'd be doing it in Myrtle Beach, whatever it is, because I really do love it here and love getting involved in these community activities. Radisson's been a little challenging. It wasn't exactly what I anticipated, but it's been a fun challenge. When you're able to turn something around, those have been the most fun times I've had in my career.
It's a man who loves challenges, exactly what the board of directors of Beach First were looking for back in '99 and 2000 as they were trying to find a new president and CEO. They got the right man for the job. Walt Standish, thanks so much for being with us this morning.
Thank you, and appreciate all you're doing.
Absolutely. Stay tuned to more Carolina People coming up next. We want to thank Walt Standish and all the staff and board members of Beach First National Bank for making today's Carolina People so special.